Normally, when you think about films that are quote unquote hood classics, you normally don't think about one that's actually, how do I say, deep. Which, of course, is a bit of a contradiction because many hood classics are, in fact, very deep films. However, there is one film in particular that always finds a way to sort of like get shuffled into the bottom. And I'm talking about the bottom with films such as Menace to Society or Boys in the Hood that sort of go on top of that said film. And of course, that said film is the film Dead Presidents. Released in 1995, this right here is the result of the Hughes brothers trying to make a film that was supposed to be something equivalent to Apocalypse Now. This was actually a film that they wanted to make for the purpose of potentially getting awards. However, the Hughes brothers wanted to, at the exact same time, try to explain the black veteran experience and also the Latino veteran experience upon arriving home from the Vietnam War. I'm talking about stuff like, say, not being able to get a job, not being able to hold a job, not being able to get access to veterans benefits, but instead it's a film that is known more for what many people have said is probably one of the worst bank heists ever put on film. And there is also this final parting shot that the judge says to Tony before sending him off to prison.
Excuse me, counsel. I, too, was a Marine, and I served my country proudly in World War II. A real war, I may add.
Yes, Your Honor.
I'm not finished yet, please. I received the Purple Heart at Guadalcanal. And this young man has obviously forgotten some very fundamental things like decency and dedication and honor. Everything the Corps taught us. He is a disgrace to everyone that has ever put on that uniform.
Yeah, we'll be exploring that scene a little bit later on over the course of this video here, as well as many other scenes and many other god-awful decisions, which, by the way, is what this film is really and truly about. Now, I mentioned it earlier that the Hughes brothers, they wanted to make a film that focused on the black and Latino veteran when they got back home from Vietnam. Of course, this film very, very quickly morphs into the struggle of Tony, our main character, and the black veteran, because there's also a great big giant component here that a lot of people oftentimes miss when it comes to Chris Tucker's character, Skip. But still, though, this film, for the most part, is about bad decisions and what may come as a result of said bad decisions. Now, before we get started, a very quick plot explanation, and if you guys can, please consider hitting that like button, and also, if you guys are new here, please consider subscribing. I'll leave some of my other work in the description box, and please leave a comment on the video itself, not only critiquing or telling me how you guys feel about the video essay, but also about the film itself. And with that right there out of the way, let's go ahead and get into it. Tony, played by Lorenz Tate, is about to graduate from high school, and he isn't exactly 100% sure about what it is that he wants to do with his life. However, there is one thing that he is considering, and that is joining the Marines. He wants to join the Marines while the Vietnam War is going on. He wants to serve his country. He wants to fight for his country. And of course, this right here is not exactly something that is, let's just say, cheered on by his friends Skip and Jose, who of course use the whole, it's another white man's war shtick. Why would you want to do that? Even though Skip would eventually find himself in country with Tony, still though, the point is this right here. Not everybody is too thrilled about Tony joining the Marines and going to go fight in a faraway land. Tony, of course, also has two jobs. One of these, of course, is running numbers with Kirby, and also his milkman job. Now, real quick, before we go any further, if you know anything about running numbers, please leave a comment in the comment section, because I've had a hard time trying to find out what it is, even here online. But still, though, if you know about that, please leave a comment in the comments. I would love to hear what you guys have got to say on that. Please enlighten me on it, because obviously I'm drawing a bit of a blank on that. But moving on. When Tony tells his mother and father what he's considering doing, his mother is obviously taken aback by this, and his father has basically got the good old-fashioned, well, you're growing up, you're becoming a man, and this person's a decision that you're going to have to live with. But still, though, the father, I think, is a person who is very important in this story that does not get mentioned, and I think Tony could have leaned on him at some point in time, but still, though, I wish the Hughes brothers had included more of him in this film. Still, though, Tony eventually gets to Vietnam, and of course, to many people's surprise, Skip is there with him, even serving in the same recon unit with Tony. Now, the deployment to Vietnam is something I'm going to be touching on a little bit later on in this video, But just know that Tony had to have done multiple tours, because he does mention that he was in the bush for 26 months, and it's how he was able to get through the deployment by just simply focusing in on what was in front of him rather than focusing in on what was waiting for him back home, which we'll get to here in a second. But still, though, this right here is how Tony got through it, was by simply just focusing on what the hell was in front of him, which is normal given the fact that he is in fact in a combat zone. But still, like I said, he eventually gets home, so let's get to that. Now, I want to say this before we talk about Tony getting home. There's a lot in the plot that obviously I'm leaving out right now as far as details is concerned. Trust me, we will get to that a little bit later on in the video, because a lot of the stuff that I'm leaving out right now is going to come up a little bit later on when we talk about Tony's decisions and his overall thinking process during those decisions that eventually led him to the god-awful armored vehicle heist. But moving on. Arriving home, he finds that this Skip is already there, and that Skip is, let's just say, hooked on something that, quite frankly, is something you should not be hooked on. After finding out that his daughter is around, finding out that his girl is around, all that type of stuff there, Tony, of course, has got his mind made up that before I go see them, before I even try to be a father, before I even try to be a potential husband, I need to find some work. I need to do this right the right way, so that way these two have got something to, let's just say, they got a roof over their heads, and I can actually take care of my family. Still, though, there's this interesting dinner table scene where Tony's mother asked him if he was hooked on some of the same stuff that other boys got hooked on overseas. And this right here, in a lot of ways, kind of sets up Tony's mindset throughout this entire process, throughout this entire story, because this right here is just something you don't ask your son when he gets back home from a deployment. We'll come back to that because it plays into the overall themes of the story. But still, though, Tony eventually meets his daughter. Meets up with his girl, the one he got pregnant, obviously his baby mama. There's also this little subplot where the girl's sister has got a thing for Tony. You find this out before he joins the Marines, and of course after he gets back. And this girl, by the way, becomes pretty important a little bit later on in the story. But still, though, Tony has a family. He has a daughter, he has a girl, but he's also got this other problem, which of course is this girl's, let's just say, a guy that took care of her while he was gone. We'll come back to him a little bit later on. Tony's got a job, but Tony is struggling. Tony is struggling to make ends meet, and he's got to listen to his girl say stuff to him like this here.
We will ourselves a little boy.
Then can you will yourself a better job?
Which, of course, is the setup for what is really the ultimate insult.
I mean, in case you haven't noticed, this here's the real world. Ain't no free meals here like in the Marines.
Hey, let me tell you something. Wasn't nothing free in the Marines. I earned every meal and every fucking dollar, all right?
Yeah, pretty daggone jacked up. We'll be coming back to this moment here shortly, but still, though, this is what Tony's got to deal with. He's got to deal with the fact that he's got people around him who have no idea what he's gone through, what he's going through, what he thinks about. Tony begins to struggle with dreams, flashbacks from Vietnam. He's got a girl who's not exactly sympathetic towards him. And while Tony tries the best that he can to make ends meet and put food on the table, it's a bad economy, and of course eventually he gets laid off. And as if to say it's not bad enough, you show up to your apartment, and right there at the doorstep is the same guy who claims that he's been taking care of your girl for the past few years while you were gone. And then you got to listen to this guy basically tell you that if you need anything, you can come to me, as if to say it's kind of an alpha move to say, I've got more money than you, always will have more money than you. And then, of course, Tony gets pushed down the steps by this guy. Held at gunpoint, even. Kind of picking up on a bit of a theme here that Tony's got a lot of things going on here and doesn't exactly have much of a support system. Either way, though, Tony eventually blows up on this girl, and we're going to be coming back to this scene a little bit later on. Now, I want you to know something right now. I do not condone under any circumstances domestic violence. However, I can understand why Tony is upset. He's been having flashbacks. He's dealing with a rough economy. He can't make money. Also, to go on top of this, you got people like Cowboy in your ear, making matters worse, reminding you about this guy, Cuddy, who is messing around with your girl. We'll come back to this scene right here a little bit later on. The fact of the matter is that all the pressure just continues to mount, and it continues to get worse and worse and worse on Tony, and he doesn't exactly have much of a support system. And this right here ultimately leads to the armored truck heist, which goes terribly. Joe was killed during the heist, and then to go on top of that, his girl's sister, who, by the way, as I mentioned before, was already sweet on Tony, she is killed as well. Now, the heist itself is something that I could break down much, much further in another video. As a matter of fact, I probably will. Just be having some fun, because if you actually look at the heist from start to finish, there's a lot here to pick apart. But we'll talk more about that in the next video. Just know for right now that the heist was poorly planned and poorly executed, and it went to hell pretty daggone quickly. And then everything that happened after the heist made matters 10 times worse. And ultimately, Tony is eventually locked up and sentenced to 15 years to life. Going back to that bit that you guys saw at the beginning of the video, of course, I'll play the other half of it for you now.
Anthony Curtis, for your participation in this crime, a crime that took the lives of several innocent people, I do hereby sentence you to the custody of the Attorney General of the United States for a period of 15 years to life.
Oh, my God.
These proceedings are concluded. This court is adjourned.
Life? What do you mean life?
Locked up for 15 years to life. So how did we get here? What were the god-awful decisions that were made? How could Tony have avoided this? And then to go on top of that, we must ask the question, did Tony deserve better? And one more thing too, and I mentioned this right here at the beginning of this particular video essay. I was under the impression, when you look at the themes of this particular film, that it was supposed to be about the black man's struggle coming back home from Vietnam and not being able to access VA benefits. Well, I think that they kind of gave away the gander with the character of Skip on this one here, but don't worry, we'll get to that in a second. So let's talk about the decisions that Tony made. Tony had told Skip that he had survived 26 months in the bush by not thinking about what was going on back home. A position that I said earlier was understandable, and yes, it is understandable. You want to focus on what's in front of you. However, opening up a letter here and there a little bit more than maybe, let's just say what Tony was doing at that time might have helped him out a great deal. Tony gets back home, and the first thing he does is he tries to find work, which is obviously understandable because you are in fact going to need a job. However, I want to say this right now. The part about VA benefits in this film that I first thought that the Hughes brothers was trying to get across was the failure of being able to access said benefits. Yet this right here completely and totally fell flat, because shortly after Tony meets up with Skip, Skip tells him he's collecting money from the VA.
I'm cool, baby. I'm Skippy, baby. I'm still pimping. Need any money or anything, you know? Man, I got over like a fat rat when I got out, man. I got my school money coming from the government once a month. I got my veterans check coming once a month. I got my 50% medical check coming to me for the rest of my life. I ain't got to do a goddamn thing else but go to the mailbox, you dig?
Hey, man, how the hell you pull a 50% medical? Nigga, you ain't disabled.
If the point was to try to say that Tony could not access VA benefits at that time and was struggling to do so, as well as Jose, then obviously this point fell completely and totally flat, seeing how it is that Skip was collecting. Skip was also abusing at that time and not trying to find work. He even said that in the film. Tony, on the other hand, is trying to find work. Now, maybe he's somebody who doesn't want to collect the benefits. Maybe he thinks that the benefits are a bit of a handout. Either way, though, at the same time, though, Tony should have used his resources or the resources made available to him, whether it be unemployment or a loan or whatever, or the best resource in the world that he did not use, his own father. I'm going to be talking a little bit more about his father shortly. I know I've said a lot in this video that the father is going to be coming back up, but the father is a World War II veteran, or it's heavily implied that he's a World War II veteran, and his father would have known exactly what Tony was going to be going through. I think if he had confided in his father a little bit more often, then I think that it's possible that a lot of the things that happened to Tony along the way of making that god-awful decision to do the armored truck heist probably would have been avoided, just saying. Still, though, the point is this here. What Tony wants to do in getting a job before he goes to see his daughter, this is 100% totally admirable. However, you find out very quickly that the girl he's involved with is not exactly appreciative of him. Let's talk about the girl just for a quick second. So, when Tony gets back home, he goes to her and her sister's house. This right here is not some dump. This right here is not some trash heap that these girls are living in. This right here looks like a pretty nice apartment for the times. And then you find out later on that she's been getting supported by Cuddy. She's been getting supported by a pimp. And if that right there is the case, then that means that she's basically been a side chick the entire time, because as we all know, pimps have got girls. Lots of girls. She's basically been a side chick to this guy right here who's basically paying her away in life. I mean, unless, of course, she had a job, which was never revealed in the film. And, of course, you do see a little bit later on when they're living together exactly how little she appreciates of him. We covered this earlier. I don't think I need to replay the clips, but the point is this right here. Tony did not feel appreciated. You've also got this guy, Cuddy. And don't worry, there's another scene that kind of set this entire thing up that happened earlier in the film that we'll get to here in a second. But the point is this right here. Tony does not feel appreciated. He's paranoid. He knows that this girl has been messing around with this pimp. At the same exact time, he also knows that his daughter has been around said pimp, and yet the girl will not kick this pimp out of their lives. And then to go on top of that, this same said pimp pushed him down a flight of stairs and stuck a gun in his face. So at some point in time, you have to ask yourself a question: when is this person going to blow up? When is this person going to make a bad decision? And there was actually a setup to this. Now, one person that I've not spoken much about in this video is Terrence Howard's character, Cowboy. At the beginning of the film, Cowboy is set up to be a bit of a sleaze. Tony beats him in pool, and Cowboy decides not to pay, intimidates him, and even gets him on the ground. Of course, this right here is before the scene where Tony goes with Kirby to I guess collect some dough, and of course we get that famous scene where Keith David's leg comes off. I don't know if Keith David's got a prosthetic or not. I just know he had a prosthetic for this film, but still the point is this right here. This right here is a character that obviously finds ways of irritating Tony to a certain degree, or he feels like he's superior to him. Of course, when Tony does in fact get home, this right here also leads to the next time these two guys are playing pool, and of course you guys are seeing it right here in the B-roll footage. Tony is, once again, beating him in pool like he did earlier. But Cowboy, not having much respect for Tony or potentially being extremely jealous of Tony, decides he's going to needle him about his girl.
Of course, you do got that fine-ass Juanita. Man, what the fuck you looking at me like that for, man? I'm just complimenting you on your taste. Of course, you know, baddest motherfucker this side of Nicky Barnes, my boss man Cuddy. I thought that might ring a bell. He used to tap that ass while you was over in the north.
Damn!
And of course, right there, what you saw, right there, Tony goes off, beats the shit out of Cowboy, beats him damn near to death. Now, this decision right here, I got to be real with you guys, and I'm not advocating for violence or anything. I never would, especially on this platform here. But still, though, the thing is this right here. Cowboy was sort of asking to get his ass kicked. Kirby even knew it. If you pay attention, Kirby says, no, let him go. It was going to happen. Still, though, at the same time, you've got a young man who's angry, has nowhere else to go. And ultimately, at the end of the day, instead of leaning on a person that would have been able to help him out, at least when it comes to the mental side of things, to help him get through things, his father, Tony chooses not to lean on his father. He chooses not to go talk to his dad. Instead, he chooses to confide in Skip and Jose and Kirby. And then, of course, during the bank heist itself, he makes an even worse decision, going to go and get an extra man, that man, of course, being Cleon, who was totally unstable when he was with them in Vietnam. The guy was literally walking around with a VC head in his pack the entire time. We'll speak more about the robbery in the next video, because that right there itself is sort of its own video. And, of course, as I said before, that I was going to be making that video for fun. But still, though, we'll get to that a little bit later on. The point is this right here. Bad decision was led to bad decision was led to that insult in the film. That right there is what Martin Sheen's character was doing when he said a real war, by the way. The truth is this right here, and I talked about this right here in my video on First Blood. A lot of Vietnam veterans got off the plane, went to work, and they found out that there was no support system on either political side of the aisle. You had far-left radicals who were out there protesting, throwing dog feces at people, calling them baby killers, all that stuff there. But then you had a whole another generation of people who did not think that the Vietnam War was a war that we should be fighting, but yet at the same time they paid lip service to these guys by praising them publicly, but then refusing to give them a job or anything, not giving them any support back home. We talked about this a little bit in the First Blood review, and I think I brought up the fact that some of these people actually were angry with the Vietnam veteran because it was the first time that the country had actually lost a war. Or at least it was perceived to be that they had lost because, of course, the media just tells you that you lost when in reality the truth is a little bit more complicated. But still, people are dead. Jose, he's gone, dies, trying to get away from the cops. Your girl's sister, killed. I mean, a bank heist that went horribly wrong. I mean, and all the decisions, when you think about how this right here could have been avoided. No real support system from society when he got back home. But like I said before, he did have somebody he could have gone to, which he obviously refused to do so. Which is really the biggest reason why it is that I think that we're in this situation, looking at Tony going to prison. But then the question comes up, did Tony deserve better? So let's talk about that to close out the video. Well, the resources were there. You got a dad who served, who could have helped guide you along. You could have gotten the VA benefits, or at least put in for them, which, by the way, he did not, or that is what the story seems to indicate, based on how it was that Skip was able to get as much as he had gotten. The resources were there. Now, even with those resources being there, it's still kind of a pain in the ass getting out of the military and trying to readjust, especially when you have a girl who, well, doesn't want to cut certain people out of her life that, quite frankly, need to be cut out of their lives. It also doesn't help when work is kind of hard to find, even though you do have the chance to get a little bit of assistance. The point is this right here. It was a very, very bad situation. Very, very relatable for Tony to be in, by the way. So just about anybody who would watch the film, I would think, would feel somewhat empathetic, and maybe even in some cases sympathetic towards Tony. Still, though, it does not warrant a armored truck heist. An armored truck heist that, by the way, as I mentioned before, while they were successful in getting the cash out, it obviously was not successful because they did not get away, where a couple of people were lost during said heist, and of course also another friend who chose to OD. Fact of the matter is that this story is about bad decisions and what bad decisions can lead to. But you guys tell me what you think in the comments section. I would love to hear what you guys have got to say. Please comment on the film itself if you've seen it. I'll try to find a copy of it, a link in the description box. I'm sure it's on YouTube somewhere. Also, please leave a comment on the video. Let me know what you think about the video essay itself. There will be a follow-up to this one right here that will be focusing more on the robbery and also some of the other characters in the film itself. Think of it more like a part 2, but still, though, that one will be out shortly after this one here. And if possible, if you guys can, please hit the like button. Please consider subscribing. I'll link the First Blood video in the description box for you guys if you guys want to check that one out as well. And like I said before, please like, share, comment. Let me know how you feel, and I'll see you guys later.